much too complex, much too complex, too complex, too complex, too complex.
What's going on, everybody? My name is James K. Holder II. Some of you may know me as Sir James II. I'd like to welcome you back to Not on My Watch. This episode is really not an episode, it's more of a production update. But there's a lot of stuff going on despite the fact that it's the holiday season. So I just wanted to kind of catch up and discuss a few of the things that are going on briefly. And then some of the things that are going on behind the scenes here at my studio where we tape the shows. So without further ado, the big news story has been that Al Franken, the Democratic senator from Minnesota, has resigned. And this is amid allegations of sort of sexual misconduct that have surfaced within the last month or so. Now, my position on this has always been very clear that Franken should resign. The Democratic Party, however, is very split on this issue. Many voters really feel sort of abandoned by the party leadership, who ultimately joined forces and called for Al Franken to resign. And I think regardless of where you stand on this particular issue, I think we can all agree that sexual misconduct should have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to representatives in our government. And that's whether you're a governor, whether you are a senator, whether you are a representative, the president, whoever. I think a lot of people were kind of mixing it to the point where it then became more about, well, why should Franken resign if Moore is still running and hasn't given up and Donald Trump is still president? And I think you have to realize that those things are sort of, those really should have no bearing on what the standard is in governance. It's like if we're making choices as a party to stand up and we're gonna say that we are the party of women, we are the party of the Violence Against Women's Act, if we're gonna say that we are the party that is ultimately against sexual assaults or against violence or against, lax or pro-gun legislation that, again, plays a huge factor into domestic abuse or domestic violence and sexual violence, I think we have to take a harder line stance than, well, the whataboutism of Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump should not be your standard for any choices that you make. So I think anytime you bring up him as a reason why Democrats shouldn't do something or why you shouldn't do something, you're automatically losing. That should never be your standard. So again, I don't know that we're really losing much here. Minnesota has a Democratic governor, so I'm not really sure. I know in elections when a senator vacates a seat, then the governor appoints a replacement, and I think that's temporary, and so they have a special election. But either way, I just feel like Minnesota, especially since under the circumstances under which Al Franken resigned, I feel like it shouldn't be too hard to find somebody to replace him and put up a good fight in Minnesota. And if we can't win that seat back in Minnesota that's blue, maybe we're losing. But if maybe it's just me, I just feel like Democrats have proven that our position on issues has been more successful in terms of winning these seats and flipping seats. So if we're worried about contested seats in blue states, that says something about what we're focused on. And it really can't be about the seats anyway. It really has to be about, principle. And I'm not a big purity person, but I just think, if we're gonna say victims and women should be heard and should be believed, then we cannot default to, GOP conspiracy theories when it comes to deciding whether we're going to take someone's, accusations or allegations seriously. So that's been like a really big story. One other big thing that's been going on is, of course, the Atlanta mayor's race. And I was very vocal about the results of this race, where, about 95,000. Now, Atlanta is a city, it's a weird city because the metropolitan area of Atlanta is about 6.5 million, or it's about 5.8 million people. So it's about 6 million. That's, the whole area. But then city proper as far as residents who live in Atlanta, it's under 500,000 residents in the city of Atlanta. I'm one of them. So we're the only ones who really get to have a say. And then you're talking about voting eligible. Yeah, that might be down to like 250,000, 240,000. Usually it's about half or something like that. And so then, you know, people were talking about the low turnout of this runoff race of this mayor's election. I don't think that it was a particularly low turnout at about 100,000 voters. But what was two things that were interesting with the results were that one, the results, the winner won, Keisha Lance Bottoms prevailed in the election by about 750 votes. So it was a really narrow margin. The other interesting fact is that there was a very clear line of who voted for who. Black people chose Keisha Lance Bottoms and white people chose Mary Norwood. And Mary Norwood is now sort of calling for a recount of all the votes, of everything. Absentee, military votes, mail-in, and provisional, all of it. And so we're still, you know, it's funny to watch the media report on a clear, like a decisive victory. The last time a mayor was chosen, it was within the same margin of about 700 votes. It was really about the same number of votes that separated Mary Norwood from Kasim Reed the last time she ran against him. She lost then. And so the media keeps kind of trying to paint it that it was a tie, and I just don't see it as a tie. It seems like Keisha won, and the ball has to move now. Like the goal has to move. It's like, oh, well, Keisha didn't win by enough, so we got to challenge her win. We got to recount the votes. We got to do. And I think there's a very clear element of racism in this race. People who live in Atlanta knew this going in. This is just an American pastime racism and white supremacy, but like within this race, it's just been very blatant and apparent. And just the level, you know, you're talking about Mary Norwood, who's a Republican, and to watch so many Democratic allies. You know, she's a Republican, but her party affiliation is independent, so she's not a Democrat. But you've got all these people who backed, you know, Bernie's candidate and then turned and backed Mary Norwood, or backed, you know, all these people backed Mary Norwood because she was self-funded, but it's kind of like she married into a bunch of wealth. And so she's not particularly smart, she's not particularly talented or popular, and she doesn't really fit into the culture of Atlanta, but based on the demographics of the actual voters. So it's kind of interesting to watch people bend over backwards and it all be based on this line of race. But then when I talk about race, or when I say, you know, white people don't do enough, white people aren't reliable allies, because if you look at, you know, even if you were just going to be loyal to the party, more people who were white should have supported Keisha Lance Bottoms, and that just didn't happen. So when we talk about race in politics and race in elections and how that relates to gerrymandering and voter suppression and voter ID, y'all have to listen to what we're saying and the examples, because if we already feel like our poll locations close earlier, you shut down locations, you require voter ID, you close down DMVs in our communities, you make it harder for us to access the ballot across the board. Then, even when, you know, our choice wins, they still don't win. It's like, oh, the Electoral College, so these white people get their choice. Or, oh, well, we really need a recount because Keisha didn't win by enough. I mean, it's just one of those things that I'm kind of, it's never going to be over with, because it's always going to happen. And I just feel like anytime you have a candidate that's presenting more access and more privileges to white people, which is basically what Mary Norwood did. I mean, she was like the Blue Lives Matter candidate. She heavily campaigned in Buckhead and really ignored every other part of the city. And for people who don't know Atlanta, Buckhead is like basically, Buckhead is a part of Atlanta, but it's a larger community and really kind of a suburb, but it's in the city of Atlanta, but it's basically a rich part of town. So everything is, it's almost like a different city, but it's really not. But it's a much wealthier part of town, and the demographics are much more heavily white than other parts of the city. And so it is interesting, and I'm kind of almost tired of talking about it, but we can't stop talking about it. So congratulations to Keisha Lance Bottoms for winning. Hopefully, you know, we don't have to riot when if there is a recount that involves like some shady dealings like there was with the election and cross-check and all this other type of stuff. I'm not really interested in that. I kind of stepped over myself there, but with the Al Franken situation and just standards for these issues, right? If we're talking about like the culture of sexual assault and how it's discussed and how it's presented and treated in the media and from the citizenship perspective, I think we're making progress. And if you look at even Black Lives Matter, it's been years. The statistics have not gotten better, obviously, over time. We've just kind of, because of technology and seeing cameras and different things, we've seen how, officer-involved shootings, we get to document that stuff more and it becomes more graphic and present. So, look at the Walter Scott shooting, which happened in April of 2015. This is in South Carolina where Walter Scott was running from police officer Michael Slager, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. And he shot him 5 times in the back, and Walter was unarmed and the same thing that we saw over and over and over and over again happen. And even though that was 2.5 years ago, just today, that officer who had retired and who had pleaded guilty to violating Walter's civil rights was just sentenced to 20 years in prison for that shooting. And so, it took a very long time. It took raising voices for a lot of issues, but this is, to my knowledge, the first time we've seen an officer-involved shooting similar to all of the other cases that we've seen be, one, indicted and charged and convicted and also sentenced to jail time. So, and especially for the length of 20 years. Now, 20 years for murder is not really a lot. You could theoretically get way more than that, but as far as the police situation goes, it's kind of amazing to see that happen, and that's such a low bar, but it is progress nonetheless. So what I will say is, for all the people saying, oh, well, Franken should resign if Trump resigns, that's kind of nonsense, and progress really doesn't happen that quickly. Today online, a lot of people, a lot of my followers, former followers, and a lot of white people were really just like, oh, I'm leaving the Democratic Party because they're weak and they forced Al Franken to resign and they don't represent me, so I'm independent now. And I just think that's like the absolute worst position you can take. And then when it comes back to like an Atlanta mayor's race and you see all these white people flooding to back this Republican who is the Blue Lives Matter candidate from Buckhead, I just feel like, again, it underscores that tension that we have in our party between the races when black people say we really just can't. It's hard for us to see you as reliable allies because over and over again, it's proven that your motivation is not really aligned across a racial barrier. That it doesn't really, the consistency doesn't hold up when there's a racial challenge to anything really. And this is a big part of that. A couple things to keep on the lookout for is that on December 12th, my birthday, Alabama will be holding a special election for their Senate race. And this is, of course, between Judge Roy Moore and Doug Jones. So we want to see that Doug Jones will prevail. Roy Moore obviously is just like, he's a nutty character. And I think besides the pedophilia, there's enough separate, his policies are just arcane enough. And even today he was asked by a black, I don't know if it was a black journalist, or a black just sort of constituent who asked him, when was America last great in your opinion? And he talks about before slavery had been abolished. So I just don't know, I don't know how, when we say people voted for Trump because they're racist, and Trump endorses someone who says America was last great when black people were chattel property, I just feel like there's nowhere else to go but with that conclusion that we draw that this is what caused this. So yeah, that's just basically par for the course with the GOP at this point. So I just don't think we should be playing the game of trying to compare what we do to what they do, because they're just really horrid people. And so are their voters. On December 15th, which is also next week, that is the final deadline to apply for the Affordable Care Act. So if you are needing a health insurance plan on the marketplace, that starts in January. It is very critically important that you go onto the marketplace and sign up for a plan. Now, a lot of the plans that were offered in 2017 were canceled for 2018, and the ACA this year has been very different than previous years. I did notice that they did a much better job of, at least in Georgia, they did a better job of sort of automatically enrolling and recommending an alternate plan for you. So you don't necessarily have to go through and reapply and do all that stuff that you did last time. You just basically have to present your information, and then they kind of auto enroll you, but you still have to go on and configure it and make your first premium payment, which I believe you have to make that premium payment by I don't believe it's by the 15th. I think you have to pay that by the December 31st, but don't quote me on that. If you can, make sure you make your premium payment by the December 15th deadline, or also just read it on your plan, but I believe you have to make the payment by December 31st for your first month to enroll in the plan for January. So, if you haven't done that, it's a big deal that you do that. And make sure that you're telling people who need health insurance or don't have health insurance to just at least enroll in a plan, pay that first month premium. If you don't have health insurance, it's a way for you to get health insurance. Even if you end up losing health insurance over the course of next year, try to start the year out with it and just pay it and keep it up as long as you can. And if you end up losing it by the end of the year, you didn't lose anything if you didn't have health insurance to begin with. So let's just at least do that. I want to talk a little bit about some of the production updates with the two shows. So this year has just been a very ambitious and tumultuous experience in trying to build this brand. I don't even have a name for a channel. It's all just a very new effort for me in terms of just doing video consistently and producing content online that's streaming or uploaded. Multi-camera work, it's all been a learning curve for me. So I apologize, some of the episodes have been late, some of the episodes have been missing in a week. With the cooking show, episodes have been extremely delayed because it takes way more effort and computing than I ever realized to do this whole thing. And so what I've really been trying to do over the course of the year is invest as much as possible in the technology, the most up-to-date technology, to streamline the process so that moving forward, I can keep producing more shows more consistently. So what you can expect next year is better sort of just consistency with the times that the shows come out and the dates. I want to just set a production schedule. I actually have a team now that helps record stuff. And so now that I know when they can come help record, I can know when, because for every episode, I have to take photos. I have to take photos of the food, I have to take photos of myself, I have to take photos of the set, and then I have to record the episode with multi-camera and pull it all together. So I've been kind of trying to just get multiple mics or receivers so that I can have one audio stream going into two different camera inputs. I've been trying to get better quality, more reliable cameras. A lot of the camera technology, I'm shifting from like DSLR more to just mobile, because mobile cameras can record for they can record 4K, they can record for 6 hours at a time without interruption. And sometimes, not that I'm cooking anything for that long, but it's just a very different experience than starting a camera. It can only record for 30 minutes. It can't autofocus. It's just the growth of what's been going on here has been really exponential. I really didn't realize how much the mobile devices like the iPad and the iPad Pro and the iPhone, the new iPhone, are doing with 4K video, the speed with which they can export high quality video. I know some of the videos you've seen on YouTube that I've done this year, I shot them in HD, but in order to get them out to you on the same day for Not On My Watch, I was having to do really, really crummy compression on my Adobe Premiere on my fairly slow dual core processor computer. And so it just would take, to export a 30-minute video at low quality would take 4 or 5 hours, you know what I mean? And so what this technology with the phones and the iPads can do, it can export it in real time in 100% quality. So you can look forward to better quality videos moving forward. And with the cooking show, I hope you've noticed that from episode to episode, I've tried to not tape a next episode until I resolve the issue from the previous episode. So the first episode, I thought I had a lot of camera failures, just flat out. Second episode, I still only had one mic, so the audio was terrible on the second episode. Third episode, audio was a little bit better, but there was a lot of background noise on it. Third episode was a really good episode, actually. But the third episode started getting into like the winter season, the shorter days, and so even when it came to like taking the food photos, where I normally used to do like a slow motion capture, I couldn't do it because I only had LED lights, and LED lights flicker in slow-mo. So then I had to get hot lights that could be on consistently in the studio. But I still need more lights. So if you notice between episodes 4 and you'll see in 5 where I'm shooting and the sunlight there's no sunlight anymore at 4 o'clock when the guests show up or 5 o'clock when the guest shows up, it looks very different, and the kitchen and set looks very different, and it's something I'm working on. So that's kind of been a big part of why those episodes have been coming out very slowly. I've been trying to put the episodes out, gather feedback from viewers, and then proceed really with that, taking in that feedback and really improving as I go along. Because there's so much money invested in each one of those episodes. I just don't want to be wasteful, and I'd rather put it out properly than not do it. Not on My Watch has been much more consistent in terms of the number of episodes. Obviously, I didn't record on Thanksgiving. I didn't record the week after Thanksgiving. And now we're here, and I'm actually doing a lot of set rebuilding. In my ideal world, the episode 5 of The Counter TV will come out on Tuesday, the 12th, my birthday. And then episode 13, because last week was episode 12 of Not on My Watch, which is really episode 13 for season 2. This, if you consider this an episode, will be episode 14. So episode 15 of the series Not on My Watch for season 2 would come out next Thursday. And I kind of might do a 2-part and a crossover with the episode, because my guest for the episode 5 of The Counter is my friend Shelby, Arshel Bernard, and she's a fashion designer who runs an ethical clothing factory. So we're talking about like basically having service-oriented businesses and how it's important to be mindful of the community and other people's needs when you run a business in any economy, whether it's in West Africa or whether it's in the United States. And so that's a really good discussion. We talked a lot. It's too much for the format of the Counter, the series, and so I want to spill it over into a crossover sort of special that would be considered a Not on My Watch episode, because it's very political. So that's kind of what I'm working on this week, and I'm doing it with all new technology. This is going to be the first episode that I'm doing all the edits in HD, all of the rendering in high quality HD, and all of it is done on the iPad Pro. None of the editing will be done on my computer at all. No titles, no nothing. So that should make it faster, but there's a learning curve because I'm using new software, and I'm trying. So look forward to that. And just so with that, just discussing the new days and times, there's a new set for Not on My Watch. So the next time you see a full episode of Not on My Watch, which will either be next Thursday or the following Thursday, it will look different, and it will be what the set has always been set up to be. So I'm very happy to unveil that to you. The new times for the shows, Not on My Watch used to come on Wednesdays, but with the Counter airing, I think it's important to have 2 during the week, and I didn't want them to be on Monday, so I just shifted the Counter to Tuesday and Not on My Watch to Thursday. So you can expect future episodes of the Counter of Not on My Watch to come on Thursday, ideally by 4 p.m. Eastern. I generally don't make that deadline, but I'm with the new set. the idea is to have it so that it's already set up and ready to go all the time. So I'm not having to adjust the set and do all this stuff and change the lights and move all this stuff every time I go to tape an episode, which used to take hours and hours and hours, and it wasn't really sustainable. So I'm working on streamlining that whole process with the editing and everything. So all that is something that is in the pipeline. So, but those are two important things. So, and then, of course, with that, I mean, I think that's all of the things I wanted to update you about. Just, it's December, it's really busy, it's the holiday season, but the world hasn't stopped, and there's still obviously news that I want to talk about. I was really sort of saddened that Keith Olbermann canceled, or that they, for whatever reason, stopped showing The Resistance with Keith Olbermann. That was GQ's sort of web series with him. I thought he gave really great feedback on issues, and he was really consistent. But that show is over now. So, I'm not gonna say what he did inspired me, because I was gonna do that without seeing it. But as I was taping Not on My Watch and as I was putting it together, I gained inspiration from what he did in his series and how he formatted it. Even so far as you can see, like when you come onto the open screen on most episodes, not this one, there's like the side by side. And I thought that was really cool. And I really look up to Keith, and I love what he does. But I'm sad that that's not there anymore. So I'm more inspired and motivated to keep Not on My Watch going and put out even more content. I want to really sort of explore and really use the technology and really just use it to be better and more consistent. So that's what you can expect from me moving forward into the new year. There's going to be at least 2 more episodes of The Counter this year. One is going to be Tuesday, the 12th. Another will air at some point in time this year by New Year's. So it might be a New Year's episode, might not be. It might be a Christmas episode, might not be. Probably not before Christmas, but probably in that last week going into the New Year. So you can expect that. Then you should expect 3 to 4 more episodes of Not on My Watch. So we're talking about next week's crossover episode with The Counter, and then there might be another just reporting depending on what happens in the Alabama Senate race or what news there is that week that's specific and new. And then I will do at least 2 more episodes going into the season. Going into the new year, end of the year. So please continue to watch, continue to support. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss that content. And then with that, I always want to thank our friends to the show. I thank you all for consistently supporting this entire year. I would not have been able to put the show together without your support. I would not have been able to make any improvements that were made in terms of the lighting, the audio, the camera quality, what I'm really focused on now in terms of the computing. I really just was in a desperate situation when it came to computing, storage, anything. And so I just kind of really was able to, you might not think it's a big deal when you send $15 or $20, but a lot of it is just me, you send $20 via PayPal, and now I can kind of, without thinking, just try out an app that promises to render video faster, or embed titles, or correct audio, or any number of things. There's just a lot of things that I have access to that I can do with those smaller contributions and even the larger contributions. But some people have donated as much as the iPad that I used to process the whole show that was gifted by a donor of the show. And so I'm grateful for what you all do. And I don't want you to ever think that, I don't take that seriously, or that, the $1 that you send or the $2 that you send to buy me coffee or whatever isn't making an impact in what the shows are and what I'm able to do in terms of putting a message out there that is to support our communities. So I hope you'll continue to support. A lot of the conversation recently has been very racial, and so I understand that that's insensitive to some people, but this is my life and this is my point of view. I gotta be really blunt about race talk, and I think that's something you can always come to expect from me. When I talk about generalities of like the history of white people's choices, given choices, what white people have voted for and done, with known like common knowledge information, oftentimes I will admit that it's disappointing, but I have to be honest about what the facts are. And so if you if you're discouraged or disappointed by what some of those facts are, I really hope you'll be working to challenge that and challenge the occurrence of white people voting for a known pedophile in Alabama. You know, work on it, because their competitor wants to bring slavery back. Their competitor thinks that America was last great when we were owned by y'all. So it is what it is. I really can't hide that. So friends to the show, this is for the last 3 weeks. So thank you all, or 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Thank you all for supporting. Irene T, Joseph R, Carole C, Danielle H, Barry G, Linda G, Elizabeth C, Kim W, Daniel M, Carole D, Pleiades M, Laura V, Dana Q, Sarah S, Vivian V, Nancie M, Hope L, Mark L, Christy T, Tamara M, Natasha R, Tina D, Maria S, Suki G, Ava M, Cynthia B, Chicagoland Breaks, Made by Marie, and Melissa F. So if you'd like to become a friend to the show and want to support, please make a donation to the link, the PayPal link, paypal.me/JKH2. This is more of just a production update. I kind of wanted to get on here and just say something. And so forgive me if there's no like titles and all that kind of stuff on here, because I just kind of wanted to get a word out here. But with that, I'd like to ask you to relax, relate, and resist as always. Make sure you subscribe.